The massive dome of the Zephyrian slave market stretched high above the crowds like a metal sky. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy moved between the holding pens, examining captured warriors with the same care they might show when buying livestock. The air hummed with dozens of different languages, all united by the universal tongue of commerce and cruelty. Commander Vera of the Stellar Confederation walked through the main corridor with purpose in every step. Her dark blue uniform bore the scars of countless battles, and her silver hair was pulled back in the traditional warrior's knot of her people. Other buyers stepped aside as she passed, recognizing both her rank and her reputation. The Confederation had ruled this sector of space for 3 centuries, built on the principle that strength determined worth. Every citizen earned their place through combat trials, and every leader proved themselves in the arena. Vera had clawed her way to her current position through skill, determination, and an eye for finding potential where others saw weakness. Today, she needed that skill more than ever. "Commander Vera," called a voice from behind her. She turned to see Captain Nix, a younger officer with ambitious eyes. "Have you decided on your champion yet?" Vera's jaw tightened. The trial of Ascension was 3 days away, and every major house in the Confederation would be watching. Her position as sector commander hung in the balance. Win, and she would secure another 5 years of authority. Lose, and she would be stripped of rank and sent to the mining colonies. "I am still evaluating the options," she replied coldly. Nix gestured toward a massive holding area where the premium specimens were kept. "The Thorian gladiator looks promising. House Kestrel paid 2 million credits for him yesterday." Vera nodded but said nothing. She had studied the reports on every fighter available. The Thorian was indeed impressive, 3 meters of muscle and natural armor plating, with 4 powerful arms that could crush steel. But impressive was not always effective. They moved deeper into the market, passing sections dedicated to different species. The Cronin berserkers snarled and threw themselves against their energy barriers, their rage barely contained. The Nexus assassins sat in perfect stillness, their reptilian eyes tracking every movement around them. The Vorthan psychic warriors hummed in harmony, their mental powers creating visible distortions in the air. "All excellent choices," Nix commented. "Though perhaps the psychic warriors are beyond your budget range." Vera ignored the subtle insult. Let the younger officers think her resources were limited. She had learned long ago that being underestimated was often an advantage. They reached the high-value section, where the most expensive fighters were displayed like precious artifacts. Massive viewing screens showed combat footage of each warrior in action. The crowds here were different, wealthier, more refined, but no less bloodthirsty in their appetites. "Now this is more promising," said a familiar voice. Vera turned to see Commander Drake of House Ironhold approaching. His red uniform was pristine, without a single battle scar, and his smile held the confident cruelty of someone who had never truly been tested. "The Thorian is magnificent," Drake continued, pointing to the massive creature in its containment field. "4 million credits, but worth every bit. My analysts predict it will dominate the trials." Other commanders gathered around, drawn by the conversation. Vera recognized most of them, ambitious officers looking to advance their positions, established leaders protecting their territories, and a few genuinely skilled warriors who had earned their respect through blood and sacrifice. "The Nexus assassin is faster," offered Commander Wells. "Speed often defeats strength." "But can it take damage?" countered Commander Black. "The trials favor endurance." Vera listened to their debate while studying the various fighters. Each species had its advantages and weaknesses. The Cronin were nearly unstoppable in direct combat but lacked tactical thinking. The Nexus were deadly but fragile. The Vorthans were powerful but required specific conditions to use their abilities effectively. A merchant approached their group, sensing potential sales. He was a Zephyrian, tall and thin with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved with practiced grace. "Distinguished commanders," he said with an oily smile. "I am Merchant Zeal, and I have the finest selection of warriors in the sector. Perhaps I can interest you in our premium offerings." He gestured toward a raised platform where the most expensive fighters were displayed. The Thorian gladiator there has won 43 consecutive battles. The Nexus beside him once assassinated an entire royal family in a single night. And the Vorthan trio can combine their psychic powers to level buildings. The commanders moved closer to examine the specimens. Each fighter was contained within an energy field that prevented escape while allowing potential buyers to observe their capabilities. Data screens showed vital statistics, combat records, and suggested starting bids. Vera followed the group but found her attention wandering. Something felt wrong about this entire process. These were all proven warriors, certainly, but they were also predictable. Every other commander in the trials would be bringing similar fighters. The battles would come down to minor advantages and luck rather than true tactical superiority. She needed something different. Something unexpected. Her eyes swept across the lower value sections of the market, areas the other commanders had dismissed without consideration. These held the fighters deemed unworthy of serious attention, aging gladiators past their prime, warriors from unknown species, and prisoners taken from minor conflicts. "Commander Vera," Drake called out. "Surely you are not considering the discount section." His tone held barely concealed mockery. Vera smiled coldly. "I am considering all possibilities. Unlike some, I do not let pride cloud my judgment." She walked away from the group, ignoring their surprised whispers. The premium section was impressive, but it held no surprises. Every fighter there had been studied, analyzed, and categorized. Their strengths and weaknesses were known quantities. The lower sections told different stories. Here, the holding areas were more cramped, and the displays less elaborate. Most buyers moved through quickly, looking for obvious bargains or specific types of fighters for specialized purposes. The real gems, if they existed, would be hidden among the overlooked and undervalued. Vera moved methodically through each section, studying the fighters with the same intensity she had shown in the premium areas. A scarred Denarian warrior caught her eye briefly, experienced and tough, but lacking the fire needed for the trials. A young Stellan showed promise but had already been broken by captivity. Then she saw him. In a corner section marked for pending disposal, a young human sat quietly on the floor of his containment area. He was unremarkable at first glance, average height and build, brown hair, wearing the simple gray clothing given to all prisoners. Unlike the other fighters, he was not displaying aggressive behavior or trying to intimidate potential buyers. He simply sat with his back against the wall, watching the crowds with alert, intelligent eyes. Vera stopped walking. Humans were uncommon in this sector of space, and she had never seen one in the slave markets before. According to her database, they came from a relatively unknown world in the Outer Rim, recently contacted by galactic civilization. Most species considered them primitive and weak compared to the established warrior races. She accessed the fighter's data file through her wrist display. His name was Ben Torres, age 24, captured when his transport ship was destroyed during a pirate raid. No previous combat record in the official databases. No special abilities listed. Current bid status showed no interest from any buyers. The file was marked for disposal in 2 days if no purchase was made. Vera frowned. Something about the situation felt wrong. Why had he been captured at all if he was truly worthless? Pirates did not waste resources on prisoners unless they had value. And his behavior was unusual. Most fighters in his position would be either cowering in fear or raging against their captivity. This human showed neither reaction. She approached his containment area. Ben looked up as she drew near, and their eyes met. There was no fear in his gaze, but no false bravado either. He simply watched her with the calm attention of someone assessing a potential threat or opportunity. "You are human," Vera stated. "Yes," Ben replied in standard galactic. His accent was unfamiliar, but his pronunciation was clear. "Your ship was destroyed defending civilians." Ben's expression hardened slightly. The pirates were targeting refugee ships. We tried to buy them time to escape. And failed. We saved 11 ships before they got us. I consider that a success. Vera found herself intrigued despite her expectations. Most captured warriors either boasted about their prowess or claimed innocence. This human acknowledged both failure and success with equal calm. You show no fear of your situation, she observed. Ben shrugged. Fear does not change circumstances. Action does. Yet you take no action. Because no effective action is currently possible. That may change. Vera studied him more carefully. His physical condition was good despite his captivity. His hands showed calluses consistent with weapons training. Most importantly, his eyes held the alertness of someone who was constantly aware of his surroundings, even while appearing relaxed. A memory surfaced from her military training. Years ago, her instructor had shown recordings of various predator species from across the galaxy. One lesson had stuck with her: the most dangerous predators were often those that appeared harmless until the moment they struck. What do you know of the Confederation trials? She asked. Enough, Ben replied. Single combat elimination until one fighter remains. Victory brings honor to the sponsoring house. And what would you do if selected as a champion? For the first time, Ben smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Win. The simple confidence in that single word sent a chill down Vera's spine. This was not boasting or false bravado. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had already calculated the odds and decided they were acceptable. Before she could ask more questions, a commotion erupted from the premium section. Vera turned to see the other commanders gathered around the Thorians' containment area, their voices raised in competitive bidding. 6 million credits, Drake announced loudly. 7 million, countered Wells. 8 million, called someone from the back of the crowd. Vera watched the escalating auction with growing amusement. They were so focused on obvious strength that they missed subtler advantages. The Thorian was indeed powerful, but its victories had all followed the same pattern: direct assault, overwhelming force, quick victory. Against opponents who could avoid or counter that approach, its effectiveness would drop significantly. She turned back to Ben, who was also watching the distant bidding war with interest. What do you see when you look at that Thorian? She asked. Ben was quiet for a moment, studying the massive creature through the crowd. For arms give it multiple attack options, but also create more targets to defend. Natural armor provides protection but limits mobility. Its victories suggest reliance on intimidation and brute force. Likely has poor endurance due to high muscle mass requiring significant energy expenditure. Vera felt her pulse quicken. In 30 seconds, this supposedly worthless prisoner had identified the same tactical weaknesses it had taken her analysts hours to discover. And the Nexus assassins? Fast, precise, probably venomous. Built for ambush tactics rather than prolonged combat. Would struggle in an open arena environment with nowhere to hide. The Vorthans? Psychic abilities require concentration. Disrupt their focus and their advantages disappear. Also, they seem to work as a unit, separate them and they become much less effective. Each assessment was accurate and delivered without hesitation. This human was not just observant, he was thinking like a military tactician, analyzing opponents for exploitable weaknesses rather than impressive strengths. The bidding for the Thorian reached 12 million credits before Drake emerged victorious, looking smug and confident. The other commanders dispersed to examine their remaining options, but the best fighters were already claimed or priced beyond reach. Vera remained by Ben's containment area, her mind racing through possibilities. The trials were not just about raw combat ability, they were tests of leadership, strategy, and adaptability. Every great military commander in Confederation history had shared one trait: the ability to see opportunities where others saw problems. Could this unremarkable human prisoner be such an opportunity? The market would close soon, and any unbought fighters would be disposed of in the morning. She had to make a decision quickly. The safe choice would be one of the remaining premium fighters, expensive but proven. The risky choice would be this unknown human with his tactical insights and quiet confidence. In her career, Vera had learned that safe choices rarely led to victory. They led to predictable outcomes against equally prepared opponents. To truly win, sometimes you had to gamble on the unexpected. A merchant approached her, noticing her prolonged interest in the low-value section. "Commander, surely you are not serious about these disposal candidates? I have much better options in the premium areas." "What is the bid price for the human?" she asked. The merchant checked his display, looking surprised. "Only 50,000 credits. Are you certain? He has no combat record, no special abilities. My analysts rated him as completely unsuitable for arena combat." "Your analysts may be wrong. Commander," the merchant said carefully, "I have been selling fighters for 20 years. This human will be destroyed in the first round against any real opponent. Please, let me show you some proper warriors." Vera ignored his protests and activated her payment authorization. Around them, other buyers were making final decisions on their purchases. The premium fighters were being loaded into transport containers with ceremonial fanfare. At the far end of the market, she could see Drake supervising the loading of his Thorian gladiator. The massive creature required a specialized containment unit and a full security escort. Impressive, expensive, and exactly what every other commander would expect. "Final call for the human prisoner," announced an automated system. "Current bid 50,000 credits. Disposal scheduled for dawn if no purchase is confirmed." Vera looked at Ben one more time. He was still sitting calmly, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. He knew his fate hung in the balance, but he showed no desperation or pleading. If anything, he seemed to be preparing himself for whatever came next with the same quiet calculation he had shown throughout their conversation. That decided her. Vera stepped forward and pointed directly at the human warrior, her voice carrying clearly across the surrounding area. Several nearby buyers turned to look, confusion evident on their faces. "That one is mine," she declared fearlessly. The merchant's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Commander, are you absolutely certain? Once the purchase is confirmed, no refunds are possible. This human has no proven combat abilities." "I said what I meant. The human." She completed the transaction with quick, efficient movements. Around them, whispers began to spread as word of her unusual choice reached other buyers. Some looked confused, others amused, and a few thoughtful. Drake appeared at her shoulder, his earlier smugness replaced by genuine puzzlement. "Vera, what are you doing? That creature will be slaughtered in the first round. Are you trying to forfeit the trials?" Vera smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness she had felt in days. "Perhaps I see something you do not. What could you possibly see in that worthless specimen?" She watched as Ben stood up in his containment area, his movements fluid and controlled. When the transport team arrived to transfer him to her custody, he cooperated without resistance but remained alert to everything around him. Even in captivity, he moved like a soldier. "Potential," she answered Drake simply. As they left the market, Ben walking between two security guards while Vera followed, she felt the familiar thrill that came with a calculated risk. She had built her entire career on seeing opportunities others missed, on finding advantages in unexpected places. In 3 days, the trials would begin. Every house would bring their most impressive champions, their proven killers and obvious monsters. And she would bring a young human that everyone expected to fail in the first round. The greatest victories, she had learned, often came from the most unexpected sources. Time would tell if her gamble would pay off. The volcanic moon of Pyraxis hung like a burning jewel against the star-filled darkness of space. Its surface was a maze of lava flows, steam vents, and jagged rock formations that had been shaped by centuries of geological violence. The Confederation had chosen this hostile environment for their trials deliberately. Only the strongest and most adaptable warriors could survive its challenges. Commander Vera stood on the observation deck of the orbital platform, watching the final preparations below. The arena itself was a natural bowl carved into the mountainside, surrounded by towering walls of black volcanic glass. The floor was uneven terrain mixed with solid rock, loose gravel, and patches of superheated steam that erupted without warning from underground vents. It was, by design, the kind of environment that favored adaptability over raw strength. "Nervous about your choice?" asked Captain Nix, joining her at the viewing wall. Vera did not take her eyes off the arena. Confidence and nervousness often looked the same from the outside. Below them, the various champions were being prepared for combat. Each fighter had been assigned a basic equipment package, lightweight armor, a plasma rifle with limited ammunition, and a combat knife. No special weapons or advanced technology were permitted. The trials tested the warrior, not their equipment. In the preparation chambers, she could see Commander Drake's Thorian gladiator being fitted with oversized armor. The massive creature required specialized gear due to its 4 arms and unusual proportions. Even the basic equipment looked impressive when scaled to fit its huge frame. Commander Wells' Nexus assassin moved through weapon checks with fluid precision. Its natural speed was evident even in simple movements, and its reptilian features gave it an alien beauty that was both fascinating and deadly. The Vorthan psychic warriors from House Blackstone worked as a coordinated unit, their minds linked in ways that most species could not understand. They moved in perfect synchronization, each one's actions complementing the others without any visible communication. And in a smaller preparation chamber, Ben Torres sat quietly while technicians fitted his armor. The human looked almost comically ordinary compared to the other champions. His equipment was standard issue without any modifications, and he carried himself with none of the aggressive posturing displayed by the other fighters. "He looks like a clerk who got lost," Nix observed with poorly concealed amusement. Vera remembered her conversation with Ben during transport from the slave market. When she had asked about his background, he had explained that he had been a navigation officer on a civilian transport, trained in basic combat but with no formal military experience. His ship had been carrying refugees from a border conflict when pirates attacked. What he had not said, but what she had gathered from careful questioning, was that he had volunteered for the most dangerous position during the battle. While other crew members evacuated civilians, he had stayed at the weapons console, buying precious minutes for the escape pods to reach minimum safe distance. He had saved over 300 lives before his ship was destroyed. "Appearances can be misleading," Vera replied. A chime sounded throughout the platform, indicating that the trials were about to begin. Representatives from major houses filled the observation galleries, their conversations creating a low buzz of anticipation. Massive display screens showed close-up views of each champion along with odds calculated by the betting systems. Ben's odds were listed at 300 to 1 against survival past the first round. Vera had quietly placed a substantial wager on her own champion. The arena floor began to fill with fighters as transport platforms delivered them to starting positions scattered across the uneven terrain. The rules were simple and brutal: last fighter standing wins. No alliances were permitted, no surrender was accepted, and no mercy would be shown. 47 champions from the greatest houses in the sector had assembled for this trial. Most were proven killers with impressive combat records. A few were unknown quantities like Ben, but even the unknowns came from species with fearsome reputations. "Fighters, prepare for combat," announced the arena controller. "Trial begins in 60 seconds. Through the viewing screens, Vera watched Ben check his equipment one final time. His movements were methodical and efficient, rifle power cell charged, knife secured properly, armor seals confirmed. No wasted motion, no dramatic gestures. He was treating this like any other job that needed to be done correctly. That attitude might be the key to his survival. 30 seconds to combat initiation. The other fighters adopted various stances and strategies. Some sought high ground for tactical advantage. Others moved toward cover positions. The more aggressive champions positioned themselves to charge at the nearest opponents as soon as combat began. Ben did something different. He studied the terrain carefully, noting the locations of steam vents, unstable ground, and natural choke points. Then he moved to what appeared to be a disadvantageous position, low ground with no cover and multiple approach routes for enemies. "What is he doing?" Nyx muttered. "He has put himself in the worst possible position." Vera smiled slightly but said nothing. She was beginning to understand how this human thought. "Combat begins now." The arena erupted into chaos as 47 fighters suddenly became enemies. Plasma bolts lit up the volcanic landscape as warriors sought quick eliminations of nearby threats. The sound of combat echoed off the arena walls, weapon fire, alien war cries, and the clash of blade against claw. The Thorian gladiator's strategy became immediately apparent. It charged directly toward the nearest group of fighters, relying on size and intimidation to scatter opponents. Its 4 arms wielded both ranged and close combat weapons simultaneously, creating a devastating zone of destruction around its massive frame. 2 smaller fighters were eliminated within the first 30 seconds, unable to match the Thorian's overwhelming firepower. A third tried to flee but was caught by the creature's superior reach. The crowd cheered as Drake's champion demonstrated exactly the kind of dominant performance they had expected. Meanwhile, the Nexus assassin employed stealth and precision. It used the arena's uneven terrain to approach targets unseen, striking with lethal efficiency before disappearing again into shadow. 3 fighters fell to its ambush tactics before anyone even realized they were under attack. The Vorthan trio worked as a perfect unit, their psychic coordination allowing them to outmaneuver larger groups of opponents. They seemed to anticipate attacks before they happened, moving with fluid grace to avoid danger while striking at exposed weaknesses. And Ben ran. Not in panic or fear, but with obvious purpose. He sprinted across the arena floor, dodging plasma bolts and avoiding direct confrontation with any other fighter. To most observers, it looked like cowardice. Several House representatives began making mocking comments about Vera's choice. But Ben was not fleeing randomly. His path took him toward a specific area of the arena where geological activity was highest. Steam vents erupted regularly from the ground, creating temporary clouds of superheated vapor. The terrain was unstable, with loose rocks that shifted underfoot. Most fighters avoided this area entirely, considering it too dangerous to navigate safely. Ben dove into it like he belonged there. His first real confrontation came when a Kronan berserker followed him into the unstable zone. The massive, furry creature was built for direct assault, with natural weapons and thick hide that could absorb significant damage. It had tracked Ben assuming the human would be easy prey away from the main battle. The Kronan's mistake became apparent within moments. As it charged across the uneven ground, Ben led it directly over a section he had identified as weakened by underground steam pressure. At the crucial moment, Ben dropped prone and fired his plasma rifle at a specific point in the rock formation. The concentrated heat triggered a massive steam eruption that caught the Kronan completely off guard. The creature stumbled, blinded and disoriented by the superheated vapor. Before it could recover, Ben had rolled behind cover and repositioned to strike from an unexpected angle. The fight that followed was not about strength versus weakness. It was about preparation versus improvisation. Ben had studied the environment and planned his tactics accordingly. The Kronan was fighting the terrain as much as its opponent, while Ben was using the terrain as a weapon. When the steam cleared, the Kronan lay unconscious from heat exposure and a precisely placed plasma shot that had overloaded its nervous system without causing permanent injury. "Impossible," whispered someone in the observation gallery. But Vera had seen what others missed. Ben had not won through superior firepower or combat skills. He had won by thinking 3 moves ahead and using environmental advantages that his opponent had ignored completely. The arena controller's voice echoed across the battlefield. 23 fighters remain. The initial chaos was settling into a more tactical phase as surviving fighters began to assess the remaining threats. The obvious powerhouses like the Thorian and the Nexus assassin had established dominance in their respective areas. Smaller groups were forming temporary alliances despite the rules, knowing that cooperation now might mean survival later. Ben continued his mobile strategy, but his tactics were evolving. Instead of pure avoidance, he began engaging targets of opportunity, isolated fighters who had been weakened by previous battles or who had positioned themselves poorly relative to the environmental hazards. His next opponent was a Stellan warrior, a proud and aggressive species known for their honor-based combat traditions. The creature sought personal glory through direct confrontation, challenging Ben to single combat with obvious contempt for the human's earlier evasive tactics. Ben accepted the challenge but on his own terms. He led the Stellan to a narrow passage between two rock formations where the warrior's superior reach and strength would be minimized. In the confined space, Ben's smaller size became an advantage rather than a weakness. He could move more freely while his opponent struggled with the cramped conditions. The Stellan's traditional fighting style, based on formal combat techniques, proved inadequate against Ben's improvised approach. Where the alien warrior expected honorable blade work, Ben employed tackle techniques, thrown rocks, and opportunistic attacks that violated every principle of formal combat. It was effective because it was unpredictable. The fight ended when Ben managed to trip his opponent onto unstable ground, causing a minor rockslide that pinned the Stellan without serious injury. Another elimination achieved through tactics rather than violence. 15 fighters remain. The arena was now dominated by the most dangerous champions. The Thorian had claimed the high ground and was picking off weakened opponents with methodical precision. The Nexus assassin controlled the shadowy areas where stealth remained possible. The Vorthan trio had established a defensive position that seemed nearly impregnable. And then there was the human, who had somehow survived longer than fighters with 10 times his apparent combat ability. Commander Drake's earlier smugness had transformed into genuine concern. How is he still alive? He demanded of no one in particular. Other House representatives were asking similar questions. The betting odds on Ben had shifted dramatically as gamblers began to realize that his survival was not merely luck. Some observers were starting to study his tactics more carefully, trying to understand the pattern behind his seemingly chaotic movements. Vera watched with growing satisfaction as understanding dawned on the more intelligent spectators. Her human was not just surviving, he was systematically eliminating opponents by thinking like a soldier rather than a gladiator. The next phase of combat brought Ben face to face with his greatest challenge yet. 3 fighters had cornered him in an area with limited escape routes, a Denarian shock trooper, a crystalline Xeran warrior, and a bio-enhanced human from the outer colonies. 3 against 1, with no environmental advantages to exploit and no room for evasive maneuvers. For the first time since combat began, Ben appeared to be in genuine danger. The 3 opponents coordinated their attack, cutting off escape routes and forcing Ben into direct confrontation. The enhanced human opened fire while the other 2 moved to flank positions. It was a textbook tactical maneuver that should have ended with Ben's quick elimination. Instead, Ben did something that shocked everyone watching. He dropped his rifle and raised his hands in apparent surrender. Is he giving up? Nix asked incredulously. The 3 attackers hesitated, confused by this unexpected development. Surrender was not officially permitted in the trials, but neither was it specifically forbidden. Most warriors simply fought until death or incapacitation made continuation impossible. Ben used their moment of uncertainty perfectly. While they hesitated, he analyzed their positions, weapons, and apparent tactical doctrines. The enhanced human was clearly the leader, making decisions for the group. The Denarian was following orders but thinking independently. The Xeran was operating on pure aggressive instinct. Ben started talking. Not pleading or begging, but engaging in what appeared to be tactical discussion. He pointed out vulnerabilities in their formation, suggested improvements to their coordination, and even offered intelligence about other fighters they might face later. It was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated level. Within minutes, he had identified personality conflicts within the group. The enhanced human's arrogance clashed with the Denarian's military professionalism. The Xeran's simple aggression was being frustrated by the delay in combat. Ben exploited these tensions masterfully. He convinced the Denarian that the enhanced human was treating him as expendable. He suggested to the Zirin that the others were preventing it from claiming glory in combat. He offered the enhanced human information about other fighters in exchange for temporary alliance. The three-warrior coalition collapsed into argument and mutual suspicion within 5 minutes. When combat resumed, it was no longer 3 against 1. It was 3 separate fights happening simultaneously, with Ben moving between opponents and using their positions against each other. The enhanced human fell first, caught between Ben's plasma fire and the Denarian's crossfire. The Zirin and Denarian eliminated each other in a confused melee that left both unconscious. Ben stood alone among 3 defeated opponents, having won through pure psychology rather than physical combat. 10 fighters remain. The crowd in the observation galleries had fallen silent. What they were witnessing was unlike any previous trial. Combat was supposed to be about strength, speed, and warrior skill. This human was rewriting the rules through tactics that most species had never considered. Even the remaining champions in the arena had begun to take notice. The predictable early eliminations were over, and the survivors were all formidable opponents who would not fall to simple tricks or environmental hazards. The endgame was about to begin. The Thorian gladiator had established complete dominance over nearly half the arena. Its combination of firepower, armor, and intimidation had created a zone that other fighters simply could not penetrate. 3 opponents had tried direct assault and been eliminated quickly. The Nexus assassin remained nearly invisible, striking from concealment and disappearing before retaliation was possible. Its speed and stealth made it nearly untouchable in the rocky terrain. The Vorthan trio maintained their psychic coordination, moving as one organism with 3 bodies. Their mental link allowed them to anticipate and counter almost any tactical approach. And Ben continued to survive through pure adaptability. But survival was no longer enough. The arena was shrinking as environmental hazards increased. Steam vents were erupting more frequently, unstable ground was collapsing in multiple areas, and the safe zones were disappearing rapidly. Soon, direct confrontation would be unavoidable. Ben seemed to understand this perfectly. Instead of continuing his evasive tactics, he began moving toward the center of the arena where the strongest fighters were positioned. Not in a suicidal charge, but with the calm determination of someone executing a carefully planned strategy. His approach to the Thorian's position was methodical and patient. He studied the massive creature's movement patterns, weapon reload timing, and defensive instincts. Most importantly, he identified the one weakness that size and strength could not overcome: endurance. The Thorian's impressive combat performance required enormous energy expenditure. Its heavy weapons, thick armor, and massive frame all demanded constant fuel consumption that could not be sustained indefinitely. Ben had noticed that its movements were becoming slightly slower, its reaction time marginally longer. The creature was starting to tire. Ben's attack was not direct assault but tactical harassment. He used the arena's remaining cover to deliver quick strikes before retreating to new positions. Never staying long enough for effective retaliation, but consistently forcing the Thorian to expend energy in defense and pursuit. Hit and run, withdrawal and repositioning, constant pressure without decisive engagement. It was a strategy that required patience, precision, and perfect timing. Most importantly, it required the kind of endurance that came from evolution on a world where persistence hunting was a survival necessity. Humans had been designed by millions of years of natural selection to outlast their prey. The Thorian began making mistakes. Frustrated by its inability to pin down the elusive human, it started taking unnecessary risks and making aggressive moves that left it exposed. Its forearmed coordination began to falter as fatigue affected its neural processing. When Ben finally made his decisive move, it was with surgical precision. He waited until the Thorian was reloading all weapons simultaneously, then emerged from cover for a sustained attack on the creature's joints and weapon systems. The massive gladiator fell not from a single devastating blow, but from accumulated damage to mobility and firepower systems. It was conscious but unable to continue effective combat. 7 fighters remain. Commander Drake stared in disbelief as his champion was eliminated by what he had dismissed as a worthless specimen. Around him, other House representatives were re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The arena had been reduced to its most dangerous survivors, the Nexus assassin, the Vorthan trio, Ben, and 2 other fighters who had managed to avoid elimination through skill and luck. But the environmental hazards were reaching critical levels. The volcanic moon's activity was increasing as planned, making the arena floor increasingly unstable. Soon, positioning and environmental awareness would matter more than combat skills. Ben had been preparing for this phase since the trials began. His knowledge of the terrain was now more complete than any other survivor. He had mapped safe routes, identified hazard zones, and calculated timing patterns for the steam eruptions. While other fighters had focused on combat, he had been studying the arena itself as the ultimate weapon. The final eliminations came quickly. The Nexus assassin fell victim to its own stealth tactics when a perfectly planned ambush position collapsed due to volcanic activity. The creature's speed could not save it from environmental hazards it had not anticipated. One of the remaining fighters was eliminated when Ben maneuvered him into a steam vent eruption, using the same tactics that had worked against the Cronin Berserker but with greater precision and timing. Another fell to the Vorthan trio's coordinated assault, but the effort left the psychic warriors exposed to Ben's counterattack. Their mental link, so effective for coordination, became a vulnerability when Ben disrupted their concentration with precisely placed plasma shots and tactical noise. Mental disciplines that worked perfectly in controlled environments faltered under the stress of environmental chaos and psychological pressure. When the volcanic dust cleared, only Ben Torres remained standing in the arena. The silence in the observation gallery stretched for long moments as the reality sank in. The human that everyone had dismissed as worthless, that had been given 300-to-1 odds against first-round survival, had won the entire trial. Combat concluded, announced the arena controller. Champion Ben Torres is victorious. Vera felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with the substantial winnings from her private wagers. She had gambled on potential rather than proven ability, on intelligence rather than obvious strength. The gamble had paid off beyond her wildest expectations. As Ben was transported back to the platform for medical evaluation, other commanders approached Vera with expressions ranging from respect to barely concealed envy. "How did you know?" Commander Wells asked. Vera watched through the viewing screens as Ben helped medical teams check on his defeated opponents, showing concern for their welfare despite having just eliminated them from competition. Even in victory, he displayed the kind of honor and compassion that made humans truly dangerous in the best possible way. "Because sometimes the greatest weapons do not look like weapons at all," she replied. "They look like hope." The human had won not through superior firepower or combat training, but through adaptability, endurance, tactical thinking, and an unbreakable will to survive. He had demonstrated capabilities that most galactic civilizations had never encountered and did not understand. As news of the trial results spread across the sector, Vera realized that this was only the beginning. Other species would want to study humans, understand them, perhaps recruit them. The galaxy had just discovered that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And Ben Torres had proven it one impossible victory at a time.